Hey, what is up, all you lonely watchers out there? Yokai Watch localization has had an interesting history. While we stopped getting games after Yokai Watch 3 and anime after the original series, some of the Waigakuen and Shadowside crew got localized names via some unexpected Yokai Watch media translations. Yes, the saviors of Yokai Watch. The English subs of Yokai Gakuen Y and Yokai Watch Shadowside done by Animax, and the continued Yokai Watch manga localization by Viz Media. All three of these creative works got translated in their entirety in a time where Yokai Watch barely existed here and was experiencing a decline in Japan, which is impressive. Both of these things combined helped bring new localized names for some of the Shadowside and Gakuen Y characters. Now, while I already made a video about some of these years ago, we got some new ones since, and my analysis was subpar. So, let's look at some of these new names, starting with Gakuen Y. Yokai Gakuen Y received the name Y School Heroes, with the Y presumably standing for yokai, which makes sense. The original name of the series translated to Yokai Watch Jam Yokai Academy Y, which was redundant and clunky. I mean, yokai is in the name twice. I assume they wanted to include the Yokai Watch name so people knew for sure this is Yokai Watch, but this is still way different. I think calling it Y School Heroes would be better for the game or anime if either were to ever come to the West. Yokai Watch fell off hard here, so I don't think this game would attract anyone other than Yokai Watch fans if they ever tried to hammer home the fact that, guys, this is Yokai Watch, I swear! Even then, most people who remember Yokai Watch wouldn't associate it with this, so it seems like a smart move. Two yokai in the series also got localized names, starting with this universe's Komajiro. Now, when I watched the subs initially when Spectre Subs was releasing them, I thought they were calling him Komadillo. Makes sense, a portmanteau of Komajiro and Armadillo. He's an armadillo of Komajiro. Do the math. Apparently, he was always just called Komajiro. Admittedly, I know very little Japanese, and their names are spelled differently. So perhaps it's more of a written joke that plays on armadillo that sounds the same when spoken. But other than him, we got the next one, Bakera. Bakera is a play off another type of cat yokai, the Bakeneko. Bakeneko are usually overshadowed by Nekomata, who are way more popular. Although Bakeneko only have one tail and tend to be more mischievous and playful, as opposed to the malicious and bloodthirsty Nekomata. His name was changed to Wampus, referencing a vague cat creature in American mythology. And while I'm not a big fan of the Japanese cultural erasure here, I am happy to see they actually thought about the name somewhat. That and Wampus just sounds funny, it fits this big goober so well. That's all we got for Gakuen Y, but don't fret, Shadowside has a lot more. Starting with some revisits, the Yokai Watch Elder. Elder is clearly meant to mean old here, originating from the Elder Magic Mirror, which was made by the ancient Genyu tribe, which Lord Enma modified in the future in order to communicate with humans. This was changed to the Yokai Watch Arcane in English, which I used to view as an unnecessary change, and it still kind of is, but Arcane is more indicative of the mysteriousness of this watch, which is a far more interesting point than its age. Who knows? Maybe there's an older watch we have yet to know about. The new metals were also changed from arcs to keystones. While arc makes some sense as something that provides protection and safety, like summoning a yokai, keystones are perfect. The keystone is a central stone of an arch that keeps the whole thing together. The watch and the keystones go hand in hand, and a huge part of the watch's power remains untapped without the keystone. On the other hand, they're stones that look like keys. I mean, they're presumably stones. We never actually get a confirmation of what material they're made out of, but it would make sense for them to be made out of some type of rock. We also got some yokai localized as well, starting out with Dear Lord Enma. Yes, Zundon Maru, everybody's favorite demonetizer. His original name is a portmanteau of Zundo, which means a cylindrical container, like a pot, and Domaru, meaning armor. This is a little gross, but not nearly as gross as Hot Pot. Yeah, this was a strange decision to call him attractive like this. I'd rather Michi be called something like Hot Pot. Speaking of, Michi! Michi is one of the few yokai whose light side form sports a completely new design, with his shadow side being Slimamander from Yokai Watch 1. Michi is a shortening of Slimamander's Japanese name, Mitsuma Tanozuchi. Similarly, His English name is a shortening of Slimamander's name, Sly. Now this is done perfectly. While Sly is very far from actually being Sly, his name is meant to be more ironic than anything. I think it's kind of funny, despite how horrifying of a character Sly can be sometimes. In my heart though, Super Sly will never beat the amazing Michi. One more Shadowside yokai got a localized name, Doketsu. Doketsu is a member of the Oni clan in Yokai Watch 4, being the right-hand man of Shuton Doji. Usually these types of yokai are named after specific myths, but Doketsu isn't. His name is likely a play on the word Dokutsu, a word meaning cave, the common dwelling place of Oni. His English name is Voidera, which is a lot harder to pin down. It's possible it could be referencing caves as a void, or potentially the Horde Void of Kyoto's East Gate. Doketsu is likely based on Ibaraki Doji, the actual right-hand man of Shuton Doji. Or right-hand woman. Yeah, the gender of Ibaraki Doji as well as their relationship with Shuton Doji is up to interpretation. Sometimes they're best friends, other times they're partners in crime, and occasionally they're even lovers. His English name could be referencing the void left when Ibaraki Doji is slain, but as I mentioned earlier, it could also be a reference to Kyoto's East Gate. In Japanese mythology, Shuten and Ibaraki would often terrorize the streets of Kyoto with other Oni, and the East Gate of the city often acted as a dropping-off point for murder victims as well as unwanted children by the locals. It could also just be a reference to his design, but either way, it looks and sounds cool, and it fits his vibe, so I'm gonna let it slide. Now we move on to the human characters in Shadowside, starting with Amano Keisuke. Keisuke is the son of Nate Adams, the main character of Yokai Watch 30 years in the future, and his name reflects this. Nate is named Keita in Japan, his grandfather is Keizo, and his son is Keisuke. They all connect to each other by beginning with the Ke sound. Nate's grandfather in the West, however, was named Nathaniel, which was an okay parody, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. With this in mind, there was no other nickname for Nathan that they could have given to Keisuke, so instead, Keisuke was changed to Tate in order to rhyme with Nate's name. Say what you will, but this is the best they could have done in my opinion. Now, where is there an example where they absolutely could have done better? The yokai detectives in Shadowside. See, these three plus Shuton Doji's human form were named after the seasons in Japan. Natsume means summer, the To in Toma is another word for winter, the Aki and Akinori means autumn, and the Haru and Haruya means spring. Let's see if they continued the theme in their localized names. Natsume became summer, a pretty obvious one. Toma became Cole, a play on cold. Akinori became Bruno, which means brown, possibly a reference to the autumn leaves. And Haruya? He became Theo. I have consulted multiple people and done an embarrassing amount of research and still could find no correlation between Theo and the spring. Am I just stupid? Am I missing something? Or did the localization team give up halfway through? Knowing how weird and lazy Yokai Watch localization can be sometimes, it could be either. If you do know a good explanation, however, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what I'm missing here. It's driving me insane. And finally, we have some localizations from Forever Friends. First up, Nekomata. I love this little goober so much. As I'm sure most of you know, the Nekomata is a cat yokai who often appears way too often in Yokai Watch. Nekomata is just as goofy as all the other twin-tailed cats in the series, so I never understood the naming being so literal here. I mean, you could argue he's more of a classic yokai in this movie like Kappa and Zashiki Warashi, but I wish his base design reflected this a little more. Nekomata just feels out of place compared to the other yokai in this movie. Now, to be fair, he does have a second form that's more Nekomata-like, but again, this is a secondary form that we barely see. His name in English was changed to Gusto, and I know everybody hates this name change, but I would like to defend it if you'll hear me out for a second. Gusto means full of energy and enthusiasm, something this little guy definitely has. I mean, look at him, I can't get over his little dance, it's so adorable. I've heard people say his name is a reference to the gust of wind he produces in the movie, but I think this is a bit of a stretch. Yokai Watch around this time was moving away from this type of humor and tackling more serious storylines, so it would be odd if they named an entire character around a single fart joke. And finally, the two human characters. Shin became Jack Cobbler, and I'm not even gonna try to defend this one. I mean, you can make the argument of how Jack can mean strong, which embodies his character arc, but Cobbler? Yeah, I don't know a single soul who likes this change. It's generic as all Infinite Inferno, and I still call him Shin. Lastly, though, one of my favorite characters in the series, Itsuki, who is probably translated the best. Warning, skip to this timestamp to avoid major Forever Friends and Yokai Watch 4 spoilers. You have been warned. One of the kanji for Itsuki, specifically this one, means purification. Itsuki's role in Forever Friends is to purify the soul of Enma's son, Shin, from the corruption of the Overseer. All brought on from an attempt to reclaim his sister's soul and bring her back to life. His translated name is great in its own way, being Alistair. Not only does it sound cool, but Alistair is a Scottish name that roughly means Defender of the People, which is a fitting role for, spoiler alert, the heir to the Enma throne. Alistair is one of my favorite characters in the series, and it feels so good to see him get the justice he deserves in his localized name. And that's all we have, and likely all we'll ever get. Unless Holy Horror Mansion stokes more interest in Yokai Watch, the Y School Heroes game and Yokai Watch 4 will likely be stuck in Japan. And while not every translation here is perfect, I'm still happy this series exists here, even if it's in a zombified form of its former self. So, what name changes did you like? Which one should have been thought through a little more, in your opinion? Make sure to let me know in the comments, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye, my Lonely Watchers.